All right, all right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Teen Talk Live.
Mhm.
And Dillard, and we are so excited to have our guest, Lady Shania Merriwether.
Hi.
Hi, I'm so glad you're able to join us tonight. We've been trying to connect for a long time.
I know. A long time.
A long time. So I just want to take a moment to welcome our guests. You all come on in. I'm so glad you are joining us tonight. Again, this is Ann Dillard with Teen Talk Live, where we are transforming the lives and minds of teens and those who love them. And
Yes.
tonight, we're still celebrating January, which is the mentoring month.
Mm.
Yeah, it's National Mentoring Month in January.
So
So we
we're
had
still
different
celebrating
people
January, which
to
is the
come on
mentoring month.
and
Mm.
talk about mentorship from different angles. And so
Hmm.
tonight we're talking about we're putting a spin on mentorship, and so we're talking about mentorship and the church and how important that is. So let's jump right in with Miss Shana. Tell us how you serve the world.
Oh, in my well, as a vocation, I am an educator by vocation, early childhood, and that's where I've been for about 16, 17 plus years.
Wow, that is
Um,
yes.
Started out with 3-year-olds, and I'm not going past kindergarten.
Why not? Come on up to the middle school.
Oh, I love middle school at church.
Okay. All right. So early childhood and so
Mhm.
now what are you doing and how else are you serving in the world?
um, right now, I took a break from teaching just to finish up my bachelor's degree in education. And just right now, I'm working on the corporate side. I'm working in corporate America, just making sure that cancer patients are taken care of and they get the money for their medication, for their chemotherapy. So that's, and then there's pediatrics in there. I can't get away from it. There's pediatrics in that too. Um, so also just in mentoring programs, I have one of my own where we did a day for girls. Also helped serve a couple of organizations. Was a part of Toastmasters and help to do a young Toastmasters program where we mentor young people and teach them how to not do public speaking, but how to improve their public speaking.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. So you are doing quite a bit. So how are you connected to the church?
I have been when I joined church at my church in 2000, Calvary Christian Church of the Apostolic Faith in Charlotte, North Carolina, 3001 Kilbourne Drive. Woo-hoo. My pastor was the late Bishop Edward C. Roberts, and now my pastor is Betty Roberts, and which is his wife. And she was my first lady, but now she is my pastor and she's my leader. They have given me the privilege to be able to serve the young people for about 15 years. I started out teaching Sunday school and just kept going from there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for all that you do. Oh my gosh, that's exciting. So I'm just going to
Yes.
take a minute to welcome our guests. We see that Lady Dana Brewington is here and Sylvia Dennis is here. Sister
Hello,
is
hello.
here. Welcome. Sister Helen Bush, Andrea Carter, and Carter. It's been a while. I'm glad you're here. Sister Sandy's here, and my husband Joseph is here. Hey, baby.
Hey.
And he said he's looking forward to this conversation. It's a great topic.
Oh,
Welcome, Coach McKenzie. I'm glad you're here. Kalina, hey, I'm glad you're here. And Pluria, I'm so glad you're here. So I'm excited to have all our guests here. So say hello. Let us know that you're here listening.
Hello.
Barnett, I'm so glad you're here too. So yes, send us a hello, send us some hearts. Let us know that you're here. This is a really interesting topic. We're talking about mentorship in the church. Hey, Lady Savage, I'm glad you're here. Mentorship in the church, and that is such an important thing to talk about because the church was such a critical part, especially when we're talking about the African American population. The church was such a critical part of our lives.
Yes.
With us in so many ways. And before we go on, we should say you have the pleasure of being the spouse to
Elder Robert Merriwether. Hey, baby. I know he's going to be on in a little bit.
we love him. We love him. Awesome. So tell me about growing up. Well, you joined your church in 2000, but did you always grow up in the church? Have you grown up?
No, no, I did not grow up in church. I went to church when I was younger, and my mom, she would take us periodically. We would go, and I was faithful we were faithful at one particular church, and my mom served there. However, I went to church, but church wasn't in me. And and so the Bible says train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's older he won't depart from it. Those foundational years, we went to church, and we went to church every Sunday. However, we really didn't go as like every Sunday like some families do. So no, I wouldn't say that I grew up in church.
Okay. And when did you become more a part of the church?
When I got married to my husband, Robert Merriwether. What I didn't know was that his grandfather was a pastor. And so
Somebody
Mary, oh, but he talked about him. He had such great respect for his grandfather that he, even in our state that we were in, he still had a lot of respect for the way that he grew up and what he was taught. And so when I got married to him, I was then baptized in June of 2000 and in May of 2000, and received the Holy Ghost in June of 2000.
Okay. And that was your boom.
Boom. Let's go. Hit the ground running.
Lady Brewington said it was a setup.
It was indeed.
Yes. So let me welcome some of our guests. Hey, Darren, I'm glad you're here. Hey, Mary, I'm so glad you're here. And Donna Reed, thanks for joining, sister. Shavia, I'm so glad you're here. And Mary Coleman and Robert Merriweather is here. Daphne, I'm so glad you're joining us. So say hello, shout out. Virginia, I'm glad you're here too. So we're talking about mentorship in the church and stop sending our teens to hell.
Yes.
That title kind of got people's attention a little bit. So, okay, so you got in 2000, and what was that like for you?
It was different because I had never experienced what I experienced at Calvary. I met some wonderful, it was through Calvary and through mentorship that I learned the things that I needed to learn. My first encounter of a mentor was she was my first lady then, but she's now my pastor, Mother Betty Roberts. And she was the first encounter that I had of a mentor. And that was one thing that I thought about when I was mentoring young ladies was how I encountered her. And the first thing one thing that everybody says when they come is, oh, we just feel so loved here. We just feel so loved. And she embedded that love. She could, see you but still love you, see you for what you were. And his grandfather, Bishop Roberts, he also had the ability to see you for who you were at that moment, but also see you how God sees you and the potential that you have. And
That
that's one of the most important things that I think mentoring in church is, mentors have the power to open your eyes to
yes,
who you are.
right. And I love what you said, that they were able to see you for what God has in store for you, or how God
Hmm.
sees you, because a lot of times we look at somebody and we decide right away if we're going to write
Right.
them off. It's like, no,
Right.
you look like this, you act like this, so no, I'm done with you.
And that was my experience as a teenager in the church that I went to. It was, oh, stay away from her.
Bad news.
And without knowing me, or without knowing my story, or knowing anything that I had been through, just basically judging by my actions. Or and one thing about teenagers, they don't understand who they are when they're teenagers. They're still growing. And I've even made that mistake of telling kids, don't go over there, don't stay away from them. But the Lord really turned my ear to him and said, wait a minute, remember, you experienced the same thing when you
Right,
were 15.
right,
So don't allow anyone in your presence to experience what you experienced.
right. And see, that's really important, because for me, it's a hard place to be, because
Mm-hmm.
you
It
want to
is.
guide your children, and you do want them to be in
Mm-hmm.
company, and you do want, them to make good choices,
Mm-hmm.
and not be influenced by, or have negative influence.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also, those kids that you might not think are of good character.
Right. Right.
But then again, who am I to say that they're not of good character?
Right. And a lot of times, what I've learned, as with Nathan, and I think about Nathan and David, and how he showed David, like, he told him this whole story about somebody who had took the only lamb from another person, and they had so much other things that they had, and he took that person's only lamb. And what he was doing was showing David who he was through a story.
Right, right,
And sometimes you can, when mentors help you open your eye, when they open your eyes, and I say they open your eyes, because sometimes I know that I was that child that some parents looked at like, I know you want to be her friend, but I'm telling you, she is fast.
mm-hmm.
So, um, and I don't mind being transparent and saying that, because I know where I came from. And
Right,
but two, sometimes, like you said, you want your children to be around people of good character. And it's incumbent upon us in the church that if this is what we want our children to do and be around, then we must create that atmosphere for it.
that's right. That is so true, because when we have such high intolerance,
Hmm.
don't even give people a chance. And I mean,
Right.
I'm guilty of that. And
Hmm.
God has done some,
We all are.
but we don't give people a chance. And that makes it really, really hard to do what we're saying. We're saying that we're
Hmm.
showing the love of Jesus Christ, but yet we are intolerant in our approach.
Right. And sometimes that can turn people away. But I learned from my leaders that a lot of times, and here's the fine line, um, because sometimes we come to church for love and acceptance, but part of the fine line of love and acceptance is receiving instruction and correction.
All right. If you're watching, just hashtag instructions and correction. That's
Part of being part of love and acceptance, um, it embodies instruction and correction. When you allow people, when people are growing, when you have gardens and you're planting seeds in the gardens and you're trying to produce a certain type of crop, you have to get the weeds out, and you have to make sure that the weeds don't grow with the product, because it'll strangle the product and it'll strangle the plant, or it'll strangle the fruit, and you won't get the fruit, or the best fruit, or the best product that you plant, because of the weeds that strangles out the life of the fruit.
That's right.
So you have to make sure that when you are in a place of growth, that you allow growth, but you also kill the weeds.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And sometimes we have to use instruction and correction to kind of kill the weeds, because there are some people who have not been taught.
Right.
And that's one word my my pastor says. You have to be taught.
Exactly.
And when you create a environment of teaching and growing,
Right.
teaching and growing.
Yes. Not just teaching. No. So okay. So I grew up in church all my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I spent most of my life in the strict charismatic apostolic.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you use the example of the crop and the weed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes if you're not careful in your instruction or your weed,
Mm-hmm.
you'll pull up the good stuff too.
That's right.
You'll out the good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it's I think it takes a lot of skill
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of I, I'm not sure what the right word is, but it takes
Wisdom.
wisdom. That's it. That's it. That's it.
Wisdom.
It takes a
It
lot.
takes the wisdom and the guidance of God to give you discernment to know what is the wheat from the tare.
That is so true, because I've seen and I've experienced this myself, where sometimes people are, yes, Lady Brunton, discernment. She said discernment. And let me just welcome Kathy. I'm so glad you're here. Arsenio, I'm glad you're joining us. And Charles, welcome. Virginia, I'm glad you're here. Hey, June, I'm so glad you're here. And Tammy and Paula, welcome. I'm glad you're joining us in this conversation. Hello, Elder Merriwether. I'm glad you're here and joining us with this conversation with Sister Shania Merriwether, who's talking about mentorship in the church and how important this is, because if we don't we discovered the word wisdom and discernment, we can really be damaging in our actions in a place
Mm-hmm.
that is warm and loving and inviting. It could
Mm-hmm.
end up being the opposite.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you go right on.
That was one thing that I learned about opening my eyes to see things differently. Because
Right.
you're not going to always, there's a generational difference sometimes. So you're not going to always see things the way younger people see things. And I say that now because my kids call me a dinosaur. They call me old. I have teenagers. And so they'll say, well, Mom, you're old. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, no, I'm not that old. But
Right.
there is even generational differences between myself and my children.
Absolutely.
As to where it's called transparency, but we called it discretion.
Uh-huh.
And where it was like, I tell you this, but I'm not going to tell you everything. But in their generation, they'll, in my feelings, I will tell you exactly how I'm feeling, and it's going to sound like this and happen like this. And there's the fine line of generational differences. But you can bring that medium there and say, it's good to feel like this. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to take your anger out on people.
That's right. That's right. That is so true. But we have to teach though.
Right. Here's
That's
how you handle this.
exactly. That's where the instruction comes in. Because there was
Right.
a time when all you would hear is, "Oh, you're so fast. You're so disrespectful. Your mom didn't teach you anything at home," and stuff like that. But you know, learning now and learning later in life about how the brain operates, it helps me to understand some of those things differently.
Right.
So your mama could have taught you, but you know, because the brain is going on and off, especially during the teen years, you're subject to doing anything impulsively.
Right. I spoke with my sister, Crystal, and she's and I told her, we were talking about this that particular thing about your mom, what your parents teach you, or and she told me the most important thing that a mentor taught her. She was sharing with me just some different things that mentors taught. Now, Crystal grew up in church.
Oh,
She grew up in church,
and the church.
and yeah, she didn't have a choice. And I gain a lot from her.
I lost you.
I gain a lot of experience from her just by her, just hearing from her. And one thing she taught me, or one thing that she did share with me was, a mentor shared with her, how you present yourself publicly gives people a background on how you present yourself privately.
Wow.
So how you present yourself publicly gives people an understanding of you, how you present yourself privately. She was like, if she said, we're always saying don't, but we never say why.
That's
You
good.
know, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do this. But we never say, hey, um, don't go to this store because there's a shooting on the corner. We just say, don't you go down there, and don't let me see you down there, or So one thing that she did share with me that I take with my children as with young people is why, because this generation wants to know why.
Right. See, the thing about when we were coming up, if we asked why, that was a big deal because you were being
Yes.
But
you better not ask why.
You better not ask why. And so being able to explain why, I think it was our youngest son, we had to parent him differently because he wanted to know the backstory. He wanted to know because it didn't make sense to him.
Right.
So we had to do a little more explaining.
Right.
And what I've learned, having worked in the school system for so long, is when we explain these things and not just say, well, you do it because I said so, right? And you're teaching critical thinking skills. And you're helping them, and it's important that they learn how to not necessarily debate, but to be able to present their argument and think critically and present that. But if we're not training them, they're at a deficit.
If you think about it, asking why is not always a bad thing. If they are presented, let's just say we love to talk about peer pressure. If we teach them to say why, if someone brings a situation to them to say, hey, come over here and join me doing this, that, or the other, and they have not learned to say why, or they have not learned those critical thinking skills, they'll just follow blindly.
Absolutely.
And sometimes when when they're taught to follow blindly and not ask why, then you that causes experiences that shouldn't take place. But
Absolutely.
when this generation starts to say, well, you shouldn't go over here to this crowd. Well, why? Well, let's talk about what could happen if you hang out over here.
Right. And I think that is so true. And I think it's a very valuable skill to also exercise in the church. You
Mm-hmm.
ask,
Absolutely.
even in people in leadership in that institution, it is so important to ask why or how come. Give me
Right.
information about that.
Right. And
Hmm.
a lot of times, when you present information with this generation, you empower them to make informed decisions.
Absolutely.
No, there you cannot make great decisions from poor information.
I love that. I love that. You cannot make great decisions from poor information. I love it. I love it. So let me welcome some new people. Hey, Sister Bonnie, you are here. And Chris. Hey, Chris. Hey, Simone. I'm glad you joined us. And Pastor Brunton is here with us. All right. The Brunton household is representing. Thank you all for being here. This is a really important conversation that we are having. We're talking about mentorship in the church. So tell me about some of the mentorship programs that you've conducted, and how the difference that those programs have made.
The first one that I participated in was the Young Toastmasters.
Okay.
And this was an experience that I got a chance to have a day with, and I did this for about 3 consecutive years. Have a day with young people who wanted to strengthen their public speaking skills. And through that, you learn they learn to build confidence first. It's confidence before you can publicly speak. You got to have confidence.
That's right.
So that was one way that I was kind of learning. And the question that I heard so many times was, well, why? Why do you why do you do this? Why is it important for me to use my voice? Why is it important for me um, to do voice inflections? Why is it important for me to give information? And so we strengthened their public speaking skills through that day, and then they become a part of another group called the Young Gavels, and what that is that's the ongoing part of that day training. And then I was allowed the privilege to do a day of mentoring for some young ladies between the ages of 12 and 18. And we had a day for the girls.
Oh, wow.
And I guess they thought they were going to come and get their nails done, and we were going to have this a day for the girls. But I had a very strong financial person do a financial seminar by the name of Shaquay Bradley, and she really empowered them on how to save. She does travel. She has a travel blog, and so she really empowered the girls on how to save and what to save and how to strategically manage their finances. They did not know that that seminar was going to play out that day in their lives.
Wow.
So after that seminar, we did what we call a poverty simulation.
Oh, wow. That sounds really interesting.
And what it is you have three probably 10 to 15 minute weeks where you give these young people, and this was what we did for the girls, and then we later did it at my church in our Joshua Generation group. Um, but it's 3 15-minute weeks. They have a job, they have bills, they have families,
Oh, wow.
and they work minimum wage. Now, figure out your life with this money, with your family, and how you're going to maneuver through life, making the money that you make. And I told you the funny part was for the ladies, for the women who participated in it, they were bill collectors, they were rental property owners, grocery stores.
Virginia said she was the rent lady.
She was the rent lady.
Did she let them
Virginia.
fly? Did she let
Oh
them?
no. Virginia sold people houses with no windows. And
Oh, she was
but they did not ask
Lord. Oh my
the
gosh.
slumlord. But it taught them before you sign a contract, know what you're getting.
That's
So
good.
you knew that your family needed to have a place to stay. How did you prepare? Some of them paid their light bill 3 times. It was 3 15-minute weeks. They didn't understand that you only pay utilities once a month.
Wow. So that's the perfect time when they should have been asking why.
Why? Now, the funny part was the one question where they asked why was at the table where we had someone selling iPods. It was supposed to be the shopping mall.
And then
And I saw the negotiation skills so much better at the shopping mall than I did in the rent office.
wow. Because you were talking their language at that point.
Right. She said, well, why would I buy this iPhone for $500 when somebody else has it down the street for $300? Or I could just buy a used one and do this. And I'm looking at her like, this is the same girl who bought an apartment with no windows.
No windows.
But her negotiation skills were heightened.
Priorities, it tells you.
I was amazed.
I know that my husband would love this because he's a financial person, and this is a great scenario. This is so awesome. So how did they? What did they say they got out of it?
One girl said that she learned how to read she said, I will never ever sign anything before I read it.
Wow.
She said, because she said, how would I have gotten out of my house if my house didn't have a back door or window and there's only one way out of my house? She said, and I put my family in danger because I didn't read the contract.
Wow. Did y'all find Virginia? Did y'all give her a fine?
Virginia was rough. Virginia was rough. She was the way that they did it was, if you didn't pay, you had to get out. And it was real life.
That's real. That is real. Because, working in the school systems, I've seen families who had to get out, at the drop of a hat, one day
right.
school and the next day, where is so-and-so? They had to move.
Right. Or I remember one little girl I was teaching, she was in my kindergarten class, and I never understood. Every day she came to school, I bathed her, we fed her, and she would eat a lot. And I was like, this little girl can eat. And I would say that in my head, like, why does she eat so much? What I didn't know was her family was living out of their car. And the last meal that she got was the last meal that she got at school.
Wow.
And that's what understanding where someone comes from, because we don't always know in the church where someone is coming from. We don't know what situation these teenagers are coming out of.
That's right.
And that's why it takes a gift of discernment. That's why it takes wisdom on how to handle teenagers when they're coming in. I'll never forget my now pastor. We had this camp. We had a camp for about, I think it was 13 years. We had a youth camp where the youth would come to the church for a whole week. And it was like a spiritual retreat for a week. No phones, no TV, just you and God. And we
Wow.
called that Camp Holy Fire. And I'll never forget, she was briefing the teachers and she said, you don't talk down to them.
Mm.
She said, you address them as young man and young lady. She said, and if by chance someone says something to you out of the way, her face, I mean, she could use two words and correct you. My pastor could use two words and correct you. And those two words were, excuse me. And that would set the entire tone. When you
Right.
hear, excuse me. And she said, if by chance you misunderstand where they're coming from, just excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you said.
Right.
She
Right.
taught us how to talk to young people in order to encourage them, and don't talk down to them,
That's good.
because they may come out of an environment where they had just been talked down to.
That's good stuff.
And
That's
that's how I think mentors, I said they open your eyes, but I think too, mentors in the church are there to open your heart,
right.
because someone's experience of God may be their experience with you, and they may judge their experience with God based on their experience with you.
That's right. That's right. That is so true. I last week I talked to we didn't have a guest last week, but I talked a little bit last week about how important the mentors and my first mentors who were from the church and how important they were for me because I had just moved to the United States. And so I was dressed in all kinds of crazy. I mean, I didn't know how to dress for this weather, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to do those things. I was just uh I was like 13 years old. I didn't know some of those core things. Plus my
Mm-hmm.
home was just chaotic. And so
Right.
the people in the church really took me in and they became, this family to me. I could go to their house for dinner. It was a safe place to be. I
Mm-hmm.
learned so much. I remember one of the sisters at the church taught me how to use deodorant,
Mm-hmm.
kind of deodorant to use as
Mm-hmm.
a teenager, and I'm just
Right.
that was so important for me
Mm-hmm.
because it was bad enough I was going to middle school and I had an accent and everything. I didn't need to be funky and get teased on top.
Right. And and I think for us sometimes we can misunderstand someone's situation, and oh my God, why is she dressed like that? Oh my gosh.
Right.
I can remember the first time I came to my church, and I thank God for the sisters who helped me. Because sometimes you wear what you have at that moment, or you wear what you think is appropriate for the situation, and you don't understand. um, Sometimes there are young ladies who just don't understand how to present themselves,
Exactly.
and you can either have two reactions. You can look at them and go, I don't know what she thought about, you know and then you could the second reaction is, I don't know, what maybe she didn't know.
Absolutely.
And when you can say, oh, maybe she didn't know. And from that, build a relationship before you tell them what to wear and what not to wear.
Say
Build that relationship.
that again. Hashtag build a relationship. If you are listening,
Build the
on
relationship.
the replay, build a relationship. Hashtag build a relationship. That is so important.
Build. I had my aunt. She was my first mentor at my church, and she's so soft. She's soft spoken, but she's not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so whenever I would say, I just don't, and she would, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, let me help you out. And then she would then explain to me, but she built that relationship with me.
Right.
She entreated me, and helped me feel accepted in the environment that I was in,
Right.
without saying, this is what we do. This is what we don't do. This is what you don't do.
Right,
um,
right.
before she reproved me, or before she corrected me, she built me. And
Wow.
a lot of times, um, we before you can, correct or anything, you have to build a foundation. The church is supposed to, not, and I'm not going to say supposed to be, because there are churches who are doing it. um, Church is a place of foundation.
Wow. That's
Church is a place of foundation.
I like that.
And when you establish that foundation with people, people can receive reproof, people can receive encouragement easier when you build that relationship with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they'll seek out because I believe people genuinely
Yeah.
want to be instructed. I
Hmm.
believe people genuinely
Hmm.
want direction, and they'll
Right.
seek you out um,
Right.
when you entreat them kindly,
Right.
right?
Right. Kindly. And the Bible says, with loving kindness have I drawn
Yes.
thee. It didn't say, with stank looks and nasty words have I drawn thee. It said, with loving kindness have I drawn thee. And
Yeah.
I can say that because people read my face and they'll go, "You all right?" And that's one thing that the Lord has been working with me with, is my, sometimes I wear my feelings on my face.
Right, right.
But some people can read your face and be turned off by you.
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to her. Look at her face. And
You look
I'll never forget.
to the mirror.
Right. And that's what, if you took a mirror, and when you were making the face that you were making, look in the mirror and see your reflection. You would,
Yes,
and people always, when you get in the mirror, you change the way you look and you smile.
exactly. You know what? For real though, that's one of the advantage of this selfie generation because you get to
Yes.
you use it to your advantage, right?
Right, right, right. It's like, turn the camera around. Keep the face that you had. Now turn the camera around, because you wasn't smiling 2 minutes ago.
Let me
But
take let me
go
take
ahead.
just to say welcome, Sita. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, Mr. John White, I'm glad you're here. Debbie, I'm so glad you're here. And Jam said, hey, Jam said, let me read her comment. She said, this is huge. This topic is so critical to effective ministry. And I agree, Jam, that is so true. And and Mel said, love lifted me. I know that's right. Love, nothing else could help. Love lifted me. And
Right.
Jam said with that steak look, hey, hey.
I know, Jam. I'm the same way. Work with me, Jesus.
And you know what?
But
It's important that we do these things and we look at how we're presenting ourselves because we want
Mhm.
the church to be a place of healing and a place of
Right,
welcoming, right? And so
right,
that people can come in and feel the love of Jesus Christ.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's one thing that I was sharing with someone the other night. I was like, the example was already set. If we understand the example that was set, we understand the purpose of the church is not for just you, but it's for others.
Mm,
And the way that, and your life is not for you, it's for somebody else,
mm-hmm.
because somebody else is going to go through what you've been through,
That's right.
and they're going to need for you to share your story. They're
That's
going to need for you, this generation seeks out mentors
that's
a
right.
lot. They said this generation is the one generation that will seek out a mentor.
That's right.
And the example was already set when Christ died for us. he didn't die for himself because he didn't need to. He died for others. He died for me. He died for others.
That's
And that example, the selfless example, was already set.
right.
And
Right.
so that example is the example that we have to look at to say, my life is not just about me. My life is not just about my trials. If I reach back
Mm-hmm.
and pull somebody else up, then I have done, my life's purpose.
Right.
Or as the words say, then my living is not in vain.
Not in vain. That's right.
If we, if we look at it from church, if we look at it as church, we're here to build.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes, whenever you build something, there are things that have to be torn down in order to replace what was once there, or in
Absolutely.
order to restore, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's really, really critical. And the thing about it is, we have to be that example. We have to pay it forward. You know,
Mm-hmm.
have to pay it forward. We have um to show love. We have to. It's like where
Right.
if there's nowhere else you can get that love, you should be able to count on it. In that
Mm-hmm.
environment, you should be able to count on it, and I think that's really critical.
I think that the Bible says love covers a multitude of sin. Um, Not only does love cover a multitude of, it says love covers a multitude of sin. And to me, and I'll say that to me because my husband's, he's, he's Shana, content. So, but to me, I would say love covers a multitude of sin, meaning that when you come in, if I'm looking through the eyes of love, then I don't see you as you come in the church. I see you for what God could do in you.
That's right. That's right.
And the very first thing that my husband's grandfather said to me, I'll never forget it. It was, and at that moment in my life, that's why I loved the show that you did about words of affirmation from fathers,
Oh yes, that
from
was
men.
powerful.
I love that one because the very first thing that he said to me, and he was my spiritual father, and he had, at that point in my life, I did not have a good relationship with my dad. I was angry with my dad, and I could not see past the anger with my father. And this is when I say mentors help to open your eyes. He looked at me and he said, daughter. And he had such a way of saying daughter to you. He said, daughter, God has something special for you. And little did I know what he meant by that.
Right,
But he
right.
said, God has something special for you. He said, but you cannot respect a father that you can. He said, you cannot love a father who you don't see if you can't respect the father that you see.
Wow, wow.
And when that opened my eyes, because it was just like, how can I say I love God if I don't love my own father,
Mm,
God who is my father, but I have to love my natural father, and that love has to be there. And
wow.
that was my mentor who opened my eyes to my relationship with my father. And after that, it didn't matter to me, what a past was to my father or whatever. My dad was my dad, and I love him. And I'm so glad that I did that, because the situation that we have now, I would have missed a moment with my father
Wow. That's
holding a grudge.
that's powerful. That is powerful. Yeah. So, again, we are talking about the power of mentorship and the importance of positive mentorship in the church,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
because a lot of people walk away with church hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another side, there is
Mm-hmm.
church love, there's church,
Right.
there's that foundation. So, as we bring this show to a close, I mean, it seemed like time just gone by. So
It did.
this is such a good topic. But as we bring it to a close, what is I want you to talk to three different set of people. I want you to talk to that church leader or mentor, and they might not know that they're a mentor, and share something really important that they need to know and look out for. And then that teenager who's struggling with whether or not they should even go back to church because they've been sent to hell. Right? So I want you to talk to those two groups of people.
So, what I would say to the leaders of the church, and you may not know that you are a mentor, there are three things that a mentor does. One is they open your eyes to see. Mentors, they help open your eyes to process God and get a correct appraisal of God. Not the second thing that they do is mentors open your heart to have a correct appraisal of God. And the last thing is mentors open doors for mentees to have that correct appraisal. And if you cannot, the first thing that you should do is build the relationship, open their eyes, open their heart, and open some doors for people. Um, don't always be selfish with your resources, but open your heart, open your eyes, and open doors for others, for those teenagers. Open the doors of your life to a teenager because they love to learn through stories. They love to learn through stories. And how can they strive to be who God has called them to be if we don't share our experiences and we have them thinking that we've been with Jesus since we've been born?
Even
Share
then,
your
we're still
stories.
not perfect.
Right. If you are still living and you are still breathing, you are still a work in progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And to teenagers who may not want to come back, I'll say this. Let me say this to you, teenager. If you've experienced church hurt, let me be the person to say I'm sorry to
Mm,
you. Let me apologize so that you won't walk around looking for an apology. Let me apologize. And I say that on my end too, because sometimes we hurt people and we don't understand, and we don't realize that we hurt teenagers. We don't realize that we push young people from God through some of our actions. So let me just say to you, teenager, who may not think about coming back to the church, I'm sorry. And we are sorry.
wow.
And when you don't feel for not allowing you to feel the love and acceptance that you needed. But I would also tell you, church is a hospital, and everybody in the hospital comes for treatment.
That's
So
right.
while you may be hurt, understand that as long as you are on this earth, you are still a work in progress. Everyone, from leaders to teenagers to children, everyone is a work in progress. And everybody won't get it right with you, but there is someone who will.
That's right.
Seek out that mentor who you feel a connection with, who you feel that relationship with, and allow them to mentor you through love, acceptance, instruction, and correction.
That's it.
Receive it all.
That's right. That's a good word. That is a good word. And, again, as we bring the session to a close, I'm wondering if anybody who is still with us, do you have any questions for Lady Shana? And she brought us some wisdom tonight about mentorship from the church perspective. So we're getting ready to wrap up, but I wonder if you have any questions. If you do have any questions, drop it in the comment bars, and I know she'd be happy to answer them. Um,
Absolutely.
yes. So it is so amazing. I'm so excited to know you. I'm so excited to be on this kingdom journey with you.
As am I with you. I love the fact, I love the day that we connected. And it was at an anniversary party, actually.
It was in Minneapolis. It was in Minneapolis. I think it was Alice's Alice and Donald's
Anniversary.
party. We were at the Avenue Eatery. That was amazing.
Avenue Eatery.
So grateful, and God had a bigger plan, and that was a setup too.
That was a setup.
That was a setup. Kingdom setup. I love it. I love it. Well, I thank you so much, Ms. Shana, for joining us. And Lady Brewington, she's still with us. And she said, how do you encourage parents to bring their teens to church when they feel like they don't want to make come like they had to? So I understand her questions. You know, her question. It's like, I had to go to church. How I don't want my child to go to church.
I would tell every parent, don't make it an option.
That's right.
Church is not an option.
Right. The thing about is that's a really good question, Bonnie. I agree. That's a really good question. The thing about it is, you know, a lot of times we can share stories about how we lived at church and we had to go to church all the time. But the thing about it, you rarely find that anymore. So don't make that an excuse for you not introducing Christ to your child.
Right. Well, see, here's my perspective on that. I work in corporate America at this moment, and someone is liable to upset me any day, and I'll be hurt.
I think we got frozen.
Back to work the next day. Oh, okay.
We got frozen.
Oh, okay. I was saying that I work in corporate America, and on any given day, someone can upset me, someone could hurt me, someone could make me mad, or I could just not feel like going to work. However, the purpose that I fulfill at my job is greater than my feelings. And you cannot make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions.
That's it. I love that.
So they may not feel like going at that moment. Of course, I have my own children who say, I don't want to go this Sunday. Well, no, as long as you live in this house, the scripture that your father has set in our house is, as for me and my house. And last time I checked, your room is a part of this house. So
that's right. That's right. You know, and the struggle is that we have a generation of parents who are not really going to church anymore. So it makes it harder, to say to the kids, you need to go. But because when we have a generation of parents who are not doing that.
And we say a lot of times, oh, it's church hurt. And I do understand that you can get hurt in church. You can. And I have been. But one of the greatest lessons of resilience, and that's one thing that I read a book, it's called Grit. I cannot think of the author's name at this moment, but she was talking about teaching resilience to her students in her class. It was a teacher, and she was teaching resilience to her students. And it was seeing what she was doing was placing difficulties in front of a group of students to see if they would still keep going through the difficulty.
Wow.
And a lot of times we don't teach our children resilience because we don't practice resilience ourselves. There's going to be difficulty in all facets of life: work, church, family. faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. Resilience is an unseen thing.
That's right. That's right. Is
And
it
the evidence of it is your power to stick with it.
right? Is it the book by Angela Duckworth?
It is.
Oh,
Grit.
okay. All right. I'll drop it in the comments.
Yes, that is a book about resilience, and we have to teach this generation. I think a lot of times that's what this generation lacks is resilience. The
I,
moment we get hurt in church, we're ready to leave church and go to another church. But can you sit through it? The same place that, and people don't understand, you get hurt at a hospital, but you can get healed at a hospital. The same
absolutely.
place you got hurt, you can get healed.
That is so true. That is so true. And then there was another question. I think I lost my screen. I'm gonna try to find it again. There was another question. Let's see. Let's see. As a mentor, how do you steer away from favoritism? That's a good one.
Whew. Even as the mentor, I have been accused of favoritism. She likes her better than me. um, I have, and I'm a proponent. I just, let me say this. I am a proponent of, and I don't say hate because hate is a strong word, but I have a strong dislike for favoritism. Because and sometimes I have, and I myself as a mentor have been accused of having favorites. And it can look like it when you use one more than you can use the other. My mother-in-law taught me this. My mother-in-law taught me my mother and my mother-in-law, I call them my Ruth. They taught me you have different children, but you can have different children, but you love them differently. You don't favor them, you just love them differently because one child may require something else, something more than the other. Absolutely. But at that point, in that child's eyes, it looks like favoritism.
Absolutely. As a mentor, to be honest, as a mentor, and even as a parent, it's easier to it looks easier, or it looks like you love that child more who is easier to appease. Or to appease might not be the word. It's the child who appears to be easier to follow directions or to stay on task, even as a teacher.
Right.
You're
right.
on because it makes your work a little easier, right? But then with the knowledge that we have, that the difficult child is the one that needs you the most.
And a lot of times we're all prone to take the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Exactly. But those difficult behaviors are telling you that I need something, and there's something wrong, and I need you more. That's what it's saying.
And I would say too, share the way you can. The way to combat favoritism, or the way to kill the perception of favoritism, is explain. I expect this out of you because I understand this is what you're capable of.
Right.
While my expectation of you is this, my expectation of this student is this, because I understand what they are capable of. And at times it may look like I spend more time with them, but I'm not. I'm pulling out the expectations, or I'm pulling out the potential of both of you. It's just requiring a little bit more work from with one of you. Right. Sometimes you just have to explain it to them.
Right. So maybe you have one of those kids that say, "Why you favor so and so? Why?"
Yes.
Answering that why again.
Right. That's the question. Why? And also, the way to combat favoritism is to empower. the children that you know that are the path of least resistance, to where if whichever child feels like you're favoring another child over them, empower that child.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you feel like I'm favoring them, why don't you help me and lead them?
That's good.
It's nothing like empowerment.
Good.
Is nothing like empowerment to combat favoritism. That's how you combat all favoritism anywhere.
That's good.
You empower the complainer.
That's good stuff. And that will shut their mouths right up. Yeah,
If you empower me and you give me responsibility, I don't have time to complain because I'm too busy trying to fulfill that responsibility.
and that runs right into what Bonnie said, and she said lots of extracurricular activities, and church becomes an afterthought.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then people, you keep the kids so
Busy.
scheduled and so busy that the fact of going to church, it's like, oh, I need to sleep in, or I need to rest, or I need to go to another activity, kind of thing.
Right. And one thing that my son, my oldest son, he got a job and he's working now. And so one Sunday he chose to work during church. And it was a Sunday that he needed to be on post.
Wow.
And I said to him, you have to prioritize God in your life, because the same place that you get these blessings, you cannot forget where your blessings come from. This, as easy as it was, the favor that was on his life got him the job.
Right, right.
But you can't take for granted that favor. And so I would say to parents that spiritual development is most important than that athletic development, that dance development, that gross motor development, whatever they're going to get outside of the church. You must understand that those things are going to come and go, but their principles and biblical principles that you build in them are the things that are going to stay. That's the resilience that you build in them. That's the values that you build in them. And they get that at church.
Right.
And church it has to be a priority. Oh, well, we're so busy. Sometimes we can't get to church. Make it a priority.
Right.
You should see your child's spiritual development as your child's natural development.
Mm-hmm.
If your child can't pass the test, they don't excel to the next level. Well, that's spiritual too, because your child could not understand how to graduate from temptation through discipleship. And one thing I learned is you cannot go to the next level until you master one level.
That's so true. That's a good word. That's a good word. And that's very important. And as parents, we have to be that example, because we,
right.
be that example. Well, this has been so exciting. I think it's the longest show I've ever done.
Oh Lord, I could just hear my husband. I talk a lot. I do.
This is good stuff. This is good. Some of my colleagues talk about, can you mix mental health with spiritual health? And
yes,
yeah, pray and get mental health.
Right. Pray and get therapy. Go to therapy.
It's really been good, and I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you being so open and transparent to share about your experience with mentorship in the church, because it's very important.
It is
very important. So I'll give you the final words, the closing words.
If you are not mentoring, don't discount this generation. Don't send them to hell and say, oh, there's no hope. Every generation gets wiser and weaker. That's true. But with them getting wiser naturally, they can also get wiser spiritually and be able to overcome um, the wiles of the enemy. Your story is important to some young person. Find them, mentor them, and then stick to it
Mm.
and see the growth that will come from you being consistent with the young people. Mentor them, be consistent, and not only be consistent but be transparent. That is the greatest gift that you can give to this next generation, because they're not the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they're not gonna take no fake stuff from you either.
That's right. They can spot a fake from a mile away.
So I want to thank you again, Lady Shayna, for being here with us. I want to thank each and every one of our guests for joining us, whether you're here live with us or you're catching us on the replay. I ask you to share this out. This is really good information. Share it, post it in your groups, and share about what we talked about, because mentorship is important. Mentorship in the church is important. And I just want to thank you all again. This is Ann Dillard with Teen Talk Live, where we transform the lives and minds of teens and those who love them. Join us again next Monday for another episode of um, Mentorship Matters, because it's January. Thank you and have
Yes.
a good night.
Thank you. Good night.